Hey everyone, welcome back to DC Thursday. I'm Pete Soderling. I'm the founder of Data Council and the Data Community Fund, and I'm your guide through the vast, sprawling expanse of the modern data ecosystem. So today we have an amazing guest with a ton of experience. Chee Chew is here, and Chee is the Chief Product Officer at mParticle. And today we're going to discuss various aspects of CDPs, customer data platforms. And she has some interesting thoughts on differentiating that space and mental models that he uses to frame the space. So we'll chat about that. And we'll also discuss mParticle's unique value proposition and dig into some of its differentiation amongst its other competitors, as well as we'll chat about types of analytics that companies can consider once their customer data is actually in order. So Chee is the Chief Product Officer at mParticle, as I mentioned. Previously, he was the Chief Product Officer at Twilio. Before that, he was a VP of Consumer Engagement at Amazon. Before that, he was a VP of Engineering at Google. And before that, he was a GM at Microsoft for many years. So Chee, that's an amazing amount of experience, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. Good to talk to you.
So with so much experience in the space and decades under your belt in the tech world, I'm sure that you've seen lots of amazing things happen through the course of your career. What's your best story from spending the last 20 years at top tech companies?
My best story. I had a ton of fun and I've been really lucky to work on lots of great projects. I think some of my best stories are just kind of the fun things that happen out and around work. At Microsoft, I remember that there's a big launch that we had. It was a long, hard slog. And on the launch, we had a 4-hour food fight. It was nuts. It was crazy. And that was very memorable early in my career when I was a developer. And then later on, there's a funny one where I was sitting waiting for a meeting with Larry Page. Sergey Brin walks by. He said, "Oh, hey, Chee, I had this idea." This is really early when we work on Hangouts. It's like, I had this idea. If we were to drop a few skydiving bikers out of a blimp over Moscone and landed them on the roof of Moscone, could you get them to have a hangout all the way down through the launch? And I was like, maybe, like, that's a month away. Like, the conference is a month away. Google I/O is a month away. It's like, yeah, can you do it? And it's like, we'll try. And then we did it. And a month later, we dropped a bunch of skydiving bikers out of a blimp, and they had hangouts.
Wow.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And you maintain connectivity all the way down.
We maintained connectivity. We had network form beaming dishes that we pointed at the skydivers. So folks on the ground actually pointed network up to them and tracked them all the way down. So we have there.
Wow.
It was network bonded, so you had multiple networks combining to one to beam out. It's crazy.
Well, if you hadn't already been in a role at Google, I would have thought that was a Google interview question. That's something. Thanks for sharing that. That is quite the story. And so what about data? Obviously, any engineer is familiar with data, and we all use databases every day. But regardless, was there sort of a tipping point in your career when you started to realize the full power of data and data analytics?
Yeah. Actually, well, when I joined Amazon, they brought me in to really work on a bunch of the shopping retail experiences. Like, what is it like to shop there end to end, including especially all the marketing stuff that happens and the personalization, all the ads you see. And so how do you make that a great experience? How do you personalize it? And this is like 7 years ago. And the secret sauce that we ended up really focusing on was just personalization. And that was around how to get as much of the data as possible from all around the company and activate it. At Amazon, we had our own CDP. We had an internal CDP and a lot of systems around that CDP to personalize every aspect that we could. And I just really learned the power of it. We brought the spend down by over half, but we increased our effectiveness. And that meant for our customers, they got better service. They got more relevant messages, fewer messages, but each one was more relevant. And we increased the results for the business. So, so that's where I really came to understand the power of data, CDP, personalization.
And what did you call the project inside Amazon at the time? Because this is probably before CDP was really a term.
It was, and there were multiple components of it. So like the team overall was the traffic team, but there were a couple of really core systems, and one of the most fundamental one is one we called Bullseye, and that, like, if you think about it, like, how do you target really effectively? And I think Bullseye was really at the heart of it. But there were other systems sitting around it, like Cafe and Nest Cafe and others that, like, the code names of it, that really then utilize Bullseye to then send the most relevant email marketing or on-site personalization or ads, things like that.
Got it. And so what was the overall state of Amazon's data infrastructure at the time? Were you using machine learning models or other more sophisticated things on top of this data, or how? I'm just curious as to kind of what the range of data infrastructure looked like at that point.
It definitely matured throughout my time there, and one of the things I give credit to the company is there was this big commitment all around the company around machine learning and advancing the capabilities of early on, like at the very beginning, there was a lot of discovery to figure out what it looked like to have great machine learning. And then over my time there, we went from machine learning, starting of deep learning infrastructure, and then really having the facilities for great deep learning as well. So it matured over time, but what I would say is that Amazon went at it with sort of all forces, whether it was a heuristic to machine learning to deep learning to model building infrastructure. I think what I learned from there was lean in really hard. Like,
Got it. And when would you say you start to saw this whole the term sort of around customer data platform emerge? Was that something that you were aware of during your time at Amazon, or did that come after?
You heard about it a little bit here and there, but I don't think it really made sense to the world in a broad sense during my time at Amazon. I think it started coming near the end, and we talked about, like, should these systems be brought over to AWS, but it was so powerful that the conclusion I came to at the time was it was such a secret sauce for retail that the time wasn't right to make that available to the rest of the world. Since then, certain aspects of it have gone over to AWS. AWS personalized. The leader there was part of my team doing some of these services for retail, but it wasn't really as big early on. It's really gained a lot of momentum.
Yeah, and probably, I mean, credit where credit's due, right? Probably it was Segment that was sort of one of the early companies in the space that sort of made many of those of us on the outside and who weren't rolling our own CDPs inside retail or e-commerce aware of the space. But actually, I think that's an interesting segue to your next position, because you ended up going to Twilio next as Chief Product Officer. Tell me about the circumstances of that move and how you ended up taking that job.
Oh yeah, I had a wonderful time at Twilio. A great company. Went over there for a couple of reasons. First of all, I've been in communications since 1999. I feel that improving our communications of the world, is really important, not only for business but just for the health of the world. And Twilio, of course, is in the center of communications. I also got a chance to get to know Jeff Lawson, the CEO founder, and the executive team, and a wonderful team. Jeff's an amazing person. Was excited to work with him, and then also, I've worked on only these big, huge companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, and the idea of joining Twilio when there were 1,000 people, 1,000
Mhm.
like teeny tiny to me, I was excited on a new adventure and learning what it's like to work in a small company. I really appreciate my time there.
Yeah, amazing. That's great. Um, and so what was Twilio's view on data and data infrastructure at the time? Obviously, they ended up acquiring Segment, which I believe you had some involvement in. Tell us a little bit about that.
When we started, Twilio's investments in data ML were a bit nascent. Autopilot was the primary. When I started, when you talk about like the ML team, it was synonymous with Autopilot. But over my time there was a lot more investments in ML, going from the speech recognition, the super network that really routes and reroutes traffic, that became machine learned and really advanced. I think it's the best of breed in the industry. I think that there's was a growing investment in it. That led also to looking at things like Segment. That was centered really around the notion of Twilio has always believed in being about enriching communications with customers and enriching that relationship. And if you're going to enrich the relationship with customers, you really have to understand the customer. And a CDP helps you really understand customers. You've got to look at what they're doing, how they're reacting to you. You can't just be a one-way blast out to them. You've got to have that full feedback loop cycle. And that data is messy. Like that, the customers, you may speak to them in one channel and they may respond in another. And you've got to collect that information from all around the company, make sense of it, reconcile it. In today's modern world, you have to get permissions, you have to be safe and respectful with consumer data, and then you've got to activate it. And that was the genesis for the value of the CDP.
Got it. And obviously, Segment lives on as a product. But I guess what you're saying is that there's probably sort of a twofold angle for the acquisition. One is that Twilio wanted to enrich their own communication with their own customers, sort of on the Twilio services side. But separately, obviously they sort of kept up with the Segment customers separately. So it seems like there's kind of a duality of what the outcome entailed. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say overall, if for a company like Twilio and many others who really care about helping people grow the relationship with their consumers, like understanding, utilizing the data is critically important, and
Mm-hmm.
it is a really important element of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Makes sense. So based on all this experience, you ended up joining mParticle. And tell us about like what's special about mParticle and why you decided to join the company.
Yeah, and Particle has been a really fun ride so far, and looking forward to all that we can do in the future. For me, like as I said, one of the motivations for me going over to Twilio was a personal one of wanting to work in a small company. I left Twilio. It grew from 1,000 to 6,500. That was incredible. And I joined mParticle when we were sub 200. So it's a new notion of small.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the focus on customer data. What everything I learned from Amazon about the importance of it, the power of it, I really believe in, and I'm excited to work in a company like mParticle that's just laser focused on activating customers' data. And I love the executive team here, and we'll be excited to see how we can shape the world.
Great. So share with us your mental model around the space, because I know you have some interesting thoughts in the way that you sort of describe the overall CDP landscape.
Yeah, CDP. I say a lot of times CDP is like old days when you would say like a CRM. You ask like 20 people what a CRM is, and you get 20 different answers. And nowadays, there's a lot of companies talking about being a CDP, and definitely lots of companies have aspects that have the elements of a CDP. Um, when I think about a CDP, and I think a lot about the CDP infrastructure, like where it's true infrastructure for the whole company, where the job of the CDP is to get data from all around the company, clean it, make it trustworthy, and then get it out to all the corners of the company to really democratize the data all around. Um, that's what I think of when I think about the infrastructure style of CDP. Now, there
Hmm.
certainly are also suites of applications that have CDPs in it. We tend to work with companies that like to have the best of breed applications. So if you think about the SaaS services you have around the company, you may have several. With the modern evolving world and cloud services, innovation happening all the time, many companies really want the very, very best tools. And so at some level, you need some level of flexibility and independence and ease of switching out these tools for the very, very best ones when they come along. It's a little bit different than if you are a company whose strategy is to buy a suite, be all in on a suite. If you are a company who is like all in on a suite, um, then the job of the CVP is not necessarily to put data all around the company, but it's to get data into that suite. And so then there might be a different type of CDP that you have there. And there are other types that, they specialize in like one aspect of activation. It may be analytics. And they would also need to get all the data in. So their CDP may be focused on getting the data in so they can do the specific analytics on it or the orchestration on it. Ours is a bit more agnostic. Ours is really allowing you to pick the best of breed for analytics or orchestration or whatever you want, and then to allow you the flexibility, the power for your developers to be agile with your data.
Got it. So you're drawing a contrast between the infrastructure CDP and I'm not sure if did you call it the application CDP? I think maybe you've used that term in the past.
Yeah, like I think about infrastructure CDP and app-based CDPs, right? And we're more on the infrastructure side.
Got it. And so like let's talk about the main use cases of a CDP, like sort of the basic use cases first, so that folks can get a clear idea as to how this tech is used and what companies typically use it most for.
Sure. Oh, well, let's separate out what used most for versus what often leads. And what often leads the initial need for a CDP comes from marketing. That's historically what starts the whole thing rolling. And my experience at Amazon, that was also what drove the initial desire. It was centered. Our internal CDP was actually centered in the performance marketing team. And the reason why it's so important for marketing is because, as any marketer knows, the secret of the game is all around personalization, it's relevance, it's targeting. If you want to do the best targeting, you've got to get access to like the whole customer. You got to understand the customer. And any marketer can look around the company and say, oh, you have that bit of data about the customer. I wish I had that. And you have that bit of data, and I wish I had that. And if I had that, I could personalize it better and better for the customer, which helps the customer, lowers our spend, and then gives us better results. So that's often what starts the whole thing. So you get that driven by the desire to personalize for marketing. Now, as you go along, you find out, oh, we really could do that for like on-site merchandising. We could use that data and personalization for predictions. You could use it for inventory management. You could use it for pricing. If you ever had this experience where you go to customer service, like you go to Amazon and you say, oh, hey, I have this return to make. And they will say, oh, you keep the product and we'll give you a refund. You can make that determination because the price of returning the shipping is more than the price of the product. And then you could do some things there. On the other hand, you could say, oh, with personalization, you understand that customer. You understand better whether they are or aren't trying to game you. You can understand also if they have a great experience, their engagement, their loyalty to you might increase and their spend might increase. And so then the value of having a great experience might be more than the cost of that one product. So that's all about personalization. How do you
Mhm.
actually understand and customize for that specific customer? What's the right way of handling for that customer? And that goes to the contact center as well as on-site pricing, marketing. It goes across the entire company.
Got it. And I've heard that some companies have scores, sort of internal scores for customers that they keep track of. I guess that's a sort of the most simplified way of representing sort of a bunch of different data points that might inform that customer service rep how to handle a return or how lax to be on the return policy. I'm presuming that that's stuff that's all driven by a CDP.
I think the best is to drive that by CDP, but the CDP can unlock more than a score for a person. And I think that one of the things that you want to that I think the ideal is what is the lifetime value of the person? What is the delta of a specific action? Like how much will that one action change the lifetime value of that customer? And at that time, because that same action a week ago, a month ago, or a week or a month later will have a different value. So it's not just about the score for that person, but what is the value for that for the customer value? What is the delta for an action at this moment in time? Like if you find that trifecta, I think that's incredibly powerful. And that's unlocked by a great utilization of CDP and the analytics around it.
And from a sort of application stack standpoint, obviously the infrastructure that sort of collects and connects and captures all this data is the core CDP value prop that you mentioned previously. What about the analytics and the models and the algorithms that run on top of that? Do you typically see that as part of the CDP vendors and their stack, or is this sort of separate analytics and models that companies have to implement on top of their CDP?
No, the world is evolving and growing and really rapidly. So I think that historically, if you go wind back several years, infrastructure CDPs would not necessarily have that. But as we move forward, I think that there's more and more of that coming into play. All that said, if you talk to data scientists, the dirty secret that they'll tell you if you get on give you the truth is that 90% of the time they're spending cleaning data. They're collecting and cleaning data and getting permission to use the data. And like 10% of the time they're actually doing analytics. So unfortunately, that's the state of the world today. And so the focus, I think, for where we can provide the greatest value right now is just reducing that 90%, getting great clean data, permissions for it, and give you the confidence, trustworthiness that you can then utilize and activate that data.
Got it. And from a sort of an implementation standpoint, do you typically see that CDPs maintain their own set of data separate from the data warehouse, or is this data that they typically land in the warehouse?
You know, typically the CDP does not serve as like the single source of truth for the data. It moves the data around, it cleans the data, it gets it to the destinations. So the CDP works really well in conjunction with a data warehouse. I think the data warehouse is kind of like, it's your warehouse where you like dump everything in. And then when you want to activate it in a specific place in a downstream tool, a CDP can really help you take that warehouse of everything and then get it to a place in the way that is most useful. So I think that as the modern data stack evolves and people understand it better, they'll understand how these really work in conjunction and support each other.
So in some ways, when you describe it like that, it makes me think of the so-called sort of newfangled reverse ETL category. How would you say sort of the principles of CDPs are different or similar to reverse ETL?
Yeah, you know, the world is evolving, and I think the innovation around things like this is just amazing. Reverse ETL is like allows you to connect go straight from your data warehouse to the downstream system. A bunch of the services that we provide in a CDP is really around reconciling identities, reconcile discrepancies, giving you a central place to manage that, enforce that, cleaning the data. So it's not what the CDP needs to do is not just get the data from one place to another, but to get it to in a form that is usable, trustworthy, and then of course, like reconciling the multiple different data points into a single user profile. Anyone who works with consumers will know that if you have multiple data points, touch points with a consumer where they can identify themselves, you'll have multiple versions of what looks like the truth. And at some point, you've got to bring that and reconcile that together.
Makes sense. Well, moving on to sort of talk about how this relates to mParticle, how would you articulate mParticle's product values?
Yeah, for us, it comes down to three key things. Number one is trust, enabling our customers to really trust the data. Throughout our discussion so far, you've heard me use that term many times. And only if you have the data clean and trustworthy can you really activate it. And if you don't have it, then you run a risk of breaking your customers' trust. So there's nothing more important than trustworthy data. From an infrastructure point of view, we believe in the flexibility that you give the power to the developers and to the company to bend our product to their will. The flexibility, the capabilities of ours are not just focused on one use case, but we want to open up use cases that we've never thought of. So the power, the flexibility, the transparency to allow a developer, if they wish to get into the product, change its behaviors, and really bend it to the will, optimize the CDP. That flexibility is incredibly important. And then, of course, empowering our customers. At the end of the day, data is like potential energy, and our value is to make sure that potential energy can get unlocked as quickly as most useful in the most useful way for customers as we can. So make it trustworthy, giving a lot of flexibility and power, and then enabling our customers.
And so you mentioned developers there a couple times, and I think that's probably because of the nature of the infrastructure-like nature of the mParticle product, correct? You see your main users as developers versus other lines of business or business users?
Actually, one of the things that I like about mParticle and what that was really important in my experience with Amazon is that it's really important that you don't focus on one constituent, because data is a team sport. The developer is often asked to like really activate the data to really like make it useful. And it's a ton of work to keep up with all the regulations. There's the CISO or the privacy or data officer who is in charge of making sure that the company abides by the regulations and the trust of the customer. And you can't ignore that person. So you've got to do a great job for whoever owns governance. And then of course, at the end of the day, there's the marketer or the on-site personalization owner, or whoever's trying to turn all that data into actions for the consumers. And you have to serve that. And so we really take a view of having the balance where we're serving those three in a balanced sort of way. We definitely believe that data is a team sport. You can't just focus on one.
Got it. And how would you say that you position mParticle sort of in the context of the other competitors in the space?
Well, as I said, I think that we pride ourselves in being CDP infrastructure. I think if you look across the competitors out there, most of them focus on a specific use case or another. They're more on the application or suite side. There are a few who really look at the whole thing as infrastructure for the whole company. This is kind of natural, and because a lot of times the use cases are really driven by the marketer, but we take a long view of it, and that we believe that in the fullness of time, the whole company will really see and get the benefit out of the CDP, out of consumer data, and marketers will lead, but they won't be the last stop. So we make an investment for serving the entire company.
And so a little bit more generally, like as a product expert and a product builder for years, do you find it helpful to define for yourself or for the team who's not your customer?
Um, I don't think about it as who's not the customer. I think about which are the use cases we're not currently focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
I like to really think about things more in the use case, and I love to think about it from an end-to-end use case scenario. Like the customer is visiting the website that is generating a set of data that we want to immediately on the very next page personalize and understand and personalize. Think through that use case. Think through all the people that really need to play a role, from the developer who's collecting the data, the merchandiser who's making that decision, and also the data governance who wants to make sure that everything we do there is above board and compliant. I like to think about that use case and then the players that have to support that use case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article a couple of years ago in collaboration with a couple of people in the community on 20 new data tools and what they don't do. And we found it illuminating to sort of force folks to think of articulating what they didn't do, which obviously is juxtaposed to what they do. And that was a fun sort of a, reverse kind of spin on allowing someone to explain the benefit to their product while also being clear about areas or use cases or features that they're not trying to go into.
Absolutely. And every company has more that they want to do than they have the time resources to do, at least at that time. And I'm a big believer in think about the final outcome you want to attain, and then work backwards from that outcome, and then make sure you solve that end to end.
Yeah, wow, that's a great advice. So in terms of where you sit in the rest of the modern data stack, what other tools does mParticle play nicely with?
We're fortunate to have a ton of great partners. If you were to go to our website, we have about 300 integration partners. So we get data from a large number of sources, and then we push data out to a large number. So we will push data out to advertising tools like your Google Ads and Facebook and that sort of things. We'll push out to analytic tools. We will ingest data from like all the sources around that you get. We have great kits that collect data from your Android and iOS apps and your website. So we have a ton of integrations that we're really proud of. Hard to pick our favorites. It's like asking which is your favorite child. But I think one of the things that I'm really proud of from a company perspective is just the breadth, right? Like when we want to serve our customer, if we can only handle like 2 of their integrations, but they have 5 or 6 or 10, then we're not doing a good enough job for them. So the breadth that we have is really important, because as I said, the goal is to get data from all around the company and push it back out to all over the company.
Got it. So tell us about some of your favorite use cases or features that are on the roadmap that you're most excited about coming down the pipe.
I can't announce all too many things, but one of the things that we've started the rollout for that I'm super excited about is this new notion of we call it tiered events. If you think about the events, all the customer events that you collect, honestly, they're not all created equal. A mouse click here, a page view there, a purchase event, like those are very different, and they have different levels of importance to you. They have different levels of impact.
Mm.
Some of them are really critical that like you will use for a lot of calculations, you will use for predictions, and some of them are sort of important in the moment, but a month later, 2 months later, you might not care so much about it. You're not going to do necessarily personalization on a mouse click on a specific thing unless that thing was a specific interesting value. So we're introducing the notion of tiered events. Some of the events may be ephemeral, where you'll pass through, go to downstream systems, but you don't really need to store it, replay it, have business continuity backups and that sort of stuff. Whereas other ones are more in the place where it is important to have business continuity. It is important to be able to replay. And then other ones are ones where you're really going to do a lot of analytics on. You're going to have ML on it. You're going to want to visualize it. And our tiered events infrastructure gives our customers a lot of power and flexibility to then pump in a lot of data, like very fine grained that may be ephemeral, but super low cost. Other ones that you really want to put more through the paces. And then those are ones that you'll have more machinery on, you'll do more calculations on. So by tiering the events and having them be pushed to different parts of the system, you can optimize how we work. You can optimize our audience calculations because they can go faster because it only has to go through and work on the data set that has relevance, and you can ignore all the others. And so that power flexibility improves our latency, helps you control costs, and it gives you an idea for what we think about when we say we want to give our customers really the power, the flexibility to control and manipulate the systems.
Got it. That sounds really cool. Can you give us a specific example of how, like, what a customer use case would be in using tiered events?
Sure. If you go to a lot of services in our class, you'll hear many customers say, "Oh, we had to stop sending a certain set of events to the school because we're getting charged a lot of those events." And so they had to make these hard triage calls. And implicitly, they're then making sacrifices. Okay, I think that's okay to not have those events there. And it'll only minimally hurt our personalization. We don't want you to make that sort of choice. And so we want to be able to handle more and more data coming in and use them appropriately. So we would, in the fullness of time, I would love to be able to, from ephemeral events, even track like every little mouse move, every little instance, and layer on the metadata behind it that helps you really understand it and put it in context. We'd love to track like every event that the customer actually has so you can do the best by them. So our use case is really not having you to make hard decisions about what you do or don't have in your whole data stack. Fundamentally, that's the purpose and what we're doing.
So it becomes largely it's a cost saving mechanism for customers so that customers don't have to decide which events to store and which not to.
Well, there's a cost savings, but you can't forget the latency. If you're going to bring in all the data, but in order to do personalization, you have to grind through all the data, you're going to slow down your systems. And so it's also a performance response issue as well.
Yep, got it. That makes sense. Great, Chee. Well, it's been great chatting with you. I'm curious, a couple questions before we let you go. What do you think's the largest version of mParticle as a company?
The largest version of mParticle, when I think about the future for mParticle and this space, and going from my experience at Amazon and looking at what the potential has, I think that very, very few companies really understand the power of the CDP. And many companies will say they have a CDP, but when I look at it, like it's in its infancy. The ability to really have every company that works with any customer, understand the customer better, and be really relevant to them, I think it has so much potential for the world. If you think about all the spam that people get, all the irrelevant communications, that should all be solved. And that not only benefits consumers, but it really benefits businesses, because that's a lot of time and money wasted. Um, every customer wants to enter into a relationship with the business and feel like they're the number one customer. They're really understood. And that's what we can provide for every single business on the planet. And that I think that's the potential that I want to achieve.
Yeah, yeah, that's a high calling. And I'm sure all of us as not just founders, but as consumers ourselves, would want that version of the world as well. So that makes perfect sense. Well, what surprised you most in your work in the modern data ecosystem so far, Chee?
Um, what's really been impressive, and I love it, is how much that the evolution is just accelerating. The amount of data that we've collected over the past couple of years has exceeded the amount of data we've collected in the past 3 decades.
Mm.
There are lots of terrible downsides of this whole COVID pandemic, but one of the upsides is really the amount of data that businesses are able to collect with people going online so much, and to turn that around into activating it and having better services for customers, and the willingness for the world to move there. I mean, that's really surprised me the most. Just the pace of innovation, the acceleration, and it's just not stopping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely a very fast moving space. And one can only assume that that's because of the fact that so many huge volumes of data continue to pile up with no end in sight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's been great to chat with you, Chee, and we're excited to have mParticle at the upcoming Data Council in Austin. I know that you and your team will be there joining us.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, how can folks get a hold of you if they want to learn more about mParticle or ask you any CDP questions?
Yeah, well, love to talk about the space. I'm very passionate about it. Of course, you have all the standard ways. It's easy to find people nowadays. I'm on LinkedIn and all that. And also, my email address at work is very guessable.
Okay.
It's really simple. So,
Enough said. Sounds good. Well, thanks for availing yourself to the community, and looking forward to catching up with you on the progress that mParticle has made in the future.
absolutely. Thank you for your time.
And thanks to all of our listeners. Don't forget that Data Council is coming up. It's our first post-pandemic in-person event, the end of March 23rd and 24th in Austin. Next up on DC Thursday in a couple of weeks, we'll have Mohammed Elgandi from Colena, who will be talking about ML model testing. So don't forget to subscribe to YouTube so that you get notifications about our next events. And we'll see you all soon.